Hey, climbers, listen up. So, how does a group of 3 songwriters write over 1,000 songs in a year, get a bunch of sync placements and songs in with sync houses, and they don't even live on the same continent, and none of them have a staff songwriting deal? Right. We're going to talk about that today. Johnny, do your thing.
Welcome to the climb. This is a show dedicated to helping singers, songwriters, and indie artists like you create leverage in the music business. You're going to have to show a vulgar display of prowess to get what you want. It's not about being a talent, a diamond in the rough, and plucked from obscurity by a big company that's going to turn you into a star. You're going to have to make it happen for yourself. The good news is you don't need any permission. The bad news is you do have to do it yourself, and you're going to need leverage. That's why we called it the C.L.I.M.B, C.L.I.M.B, creating leverage in the music business. That's a Baxter from a good friend and co-host, Mr. Brent Baxter. He's an award-winning hit songwriter with cuts by Alan Jackson, Randy Travis, Lady A, Joe Nichols, and more. Got a song on a Grammy-nominated album. He's a Dove Award winner. Am I right? That's a winner?
Well, I have a song on a Dove Award-winning album, and I've been nominated for Dove as a writer. So
you're Dove adjacent. That's good enough for me. Got a couple number ones in Southern Gospel last year, and the train is still on the tracks. But what I love about Brent is he helps songwriters like you become pro by revealing how you write like a pro, do business like a pro, and then on the regular, he gets you in touch with the pros to create that relationship and make it happen. You can find Brent at songwritingpro.com. Once again, that's songwritingpro.com.
And I would like to introduce you to my co-host, Johnny Dwinell. Johnny owns Daredevil Production. They're breaking artists digitally by identifying new fans through data. Yeah, it's complicated, but thankfully, Johnny's smart. If you're an artist looking to increase your streams, blow up your video views, sell more live show tickets, and get discovered by new fans, TV, and music industry pros, then Daredevil Production can help. Daredevil has worked with multi-platinum artists like Colin Ray, Tracy Lawrence, Ty Herndon, and Andy Griggs, just to name a few. You can find Johnny at daredevilproduction.com. That is production, singular, no S, and there's no S because there is no other Johnny D.
Dude, we're surrounded by greatness right now on this podcast.
We are. I'm in high cotton. I feel yes. I feel like I'm in the right room today.
Introduce our guests, sir.
Yeah, we're going to dive into this one. So, I have a feeling that the whole show would be the intros if we really did them justice. And we'll reveal more of this as we go. But we have 3 guests with us today, so I think this is probably a climb record. Ladies first, we have Lucy LeBlanc, who is a songwriter in Canada, who I've run across several times in Play for Publisher events and different things. She consistently does strong work, and so I've heard a bunch of her stuff, and she's made it to the events and getting all the publisher feedback, all that good stuff.
She's in the sky with diamonds. Nothing but gold coming out of that finger right there.
That's right. So she's had over 100 cuts. Let's see. And so we're going to dive into more of that, I'm sure, in a little bit. So we also have Paul DeMarco, who's our friend from the UK, who is an artist, puts out a single every 4 weeks. That's what he's rocking with. And doing great work. Also run across him in several of the Play for Publisher events and that sort of stuff. So that's kind of how I know both Lucy and Paul, and our buddy Bill O'Hanlon, which all these people you've heard about on the climb before, who's appeared on Oprah. He's written over 40 books. He's co-written 3 books on songwriting. I think one of them probably is the number 1 songwriting book on Amazon right now, depending on when you listen to this, and probably no matter when you listen to this. This crew as a whole, the past year, like 2021, has written over 1,000 songs, had a bunch of songs taken by sync houses to hopefully land in sync placements, that sort of stuff, a bunch of indie cuts. Basically getting it done. They don't even live on the same continent, all of them, and none of them have a staff songwriting deal. And I find that really impressive. Just the work that these people are putting in and getting results. And so that's what we're going to dive into today. So Lucy, Paul, and Bill, welcome to The Climb.
Hey guys, thanks for having us.
Thanks. Yeah, and in advance, we just want to apologize to everybody out there for ruining your excuse that you can't get anything done because you don't have a publishing deal, or it's just real hard to find songwriters in this town. Sorry, not sorry.
Because none of them are in this town. Whatever town it is.
Not even in the same damn country.
I know. We got U.S., Canada, UK. This is a beautiful thing. So They are rocking in the free world.
Well, hey, real quick, join the C.L.I.M.B community. Let's skip past this though, because I want to get to talking to these guys. But join the C.L.I.M
Yes.
community on Facebook. We got to ask to be let in. We let everybody in. Leave a rating and review, and tell a friend about it. That's if you're spending this much time with us, it's for some damn reason. It's not because Brent's handsome.
Nope.
It's because
The audio podcast.
He's got a face for radio.
Yeah, man.
It's because we're doing something to make a difference here, and tell somebody else about it. Spread it around. All right.
That's right. Normally we share our wins for the week, but you know what? This whole episode
It's all
is
about
just
wins.
one. But we should drop it on a Wednesday, New Heights Day, because it's all about winning this one. So we're going to skip over that this time, just so we can get into it.
Yeah.
So, man, I don't even know where to start.
Well, I got a question to start it off. How did
Yes.
you all get connected? How did this whole tripod start?
Yeah.
I am a member of a songwriting organization, and it's headed up by Clay Mills and Marty Dodson.
Mm-hmm.
And Clay sent me a email one day and said, "Hey Lucy, I think you should get hold of Paul DeMarco and write with him." So
Nice.
I contacted Paul, and then thought, well, I like to bring people together and write. So I love to set up three-way co-writes. So I thought, who would be a good mix? And I thought, Bill. So I contacted Bill, and that's how the three of us started. And also contacted, I have another group that I write with Paul on a regular basis as well. So that's how that started.
Nice.
And I'll say I knew Lucy from several things. We went to a songwriting conference together, a live one that happens every 6 months, and we met there, and we met online before. And what inspired me about Lucy is that she was not a spring chicken like I'm not. I have a T-shirt that says "openly gray." That's just that'll tell you where I am in the decades. And Lucy one time posted on one of these forums that she'd written. I can't remember right now. About 4 or 5 years ago, she said, "I've written 150 songs this year," and I was a little stunned because I had only written 40 songs before I came to Nashville, and I never co-written. And so I was like, wow, she's written 100 songs. I got to up my game. She's written 100 songs, and I never counted how many songs. So I went back and counted, and I'd written 40 songs in the past year. I'd written 40 songs before I came to Nashville. Then in the past year, I'd written 40 songs, and then I started co-writing. And the next year, we sort of compared notes, and I said to Lucy, "Hey, last year I saw you wrote 150 songs. This year I wrote 150 songs." She said, "Oh, I wrote 200 this year," and I was like, "Oh,
She's like, "That's
I'll
cute.
never catch
That's
up
cute,
to
O'Hanlon."
Lucy. I'll never catch up to Lucy." And the other thing is, when I first came to Nashville, I heard some pros say, "You got to write 1,000 songs to write one extraordinary song," and I thought, 1,000 songs? I will be dead before I write 1,000 songs. And Lucy was a great inspiration for me to up my game. And so the next year, she said, "Well, I like to have a little friendly competition. Why don't we see who writes the most songs this next year?" And I thought, well, you're going to win, but it will motivate me to get in there and write more. And we started a competition, what we called a co-opetition the next year, where we were, because we write together sometimes 4 or 5 times, maybe 6 times a month. So some of those songs were co-written, and we encourage each other. We kind of vote for each other. And then we met Paul, and the magic happens, as we've heard you talk about on the climb many times. Sometimes you get in a room and it's just the right combination of people, and the magic happens, and you want to get into that room again as long as you can. And with Paul and Lucy and Bill, that magic happens regularly. So we decided to do a co-opetition last year, and it was the best year any of us had ever had in terms of writing and success, as you said.
Well, that's awesome. So it's not all about the numbers, but I'm curious because we'd see postings on New Heights every Wednesday. Bill's like, "I wrote my 4,000 song for the year," or whatever. So how did the competition, whatever? How did that work out? last year? How'd the numbers turn out? I'm curious.
Go ahead, Paul.
Paul?
So,
I mean,
I
everybody
think
wins,
we should let
right?
Paul brag
yeah,
a little bit because he
Well,
won it.
well,
Go
all
ahead.
I'm saying is Paul's got a trophy he can hold up.
well, it was kind of cool because it all started. The year started with this idea because Bill and Lucy had actually done it the year before. They'd kind of done it, and I'd been watching, and I said, right, I'm going to join it this year, and so obviously we were writing together, but we were also writing with other people. I was also writing on my own, and the impact that it made, which we'll probably talk about later, is every morning I'd wake up with this competition in mind. Every morning I'd think, okay, what are my numbers? What have I written today? And I'd literally, with my morning drink, I'd sit there with my phone and I'd write something. I'm not saying it was the greatest thing I'd ever written, but because of that, it's almost like counting calories when you're on a diet. It was like it was the motivation for it. And so by the end of last year, so I was chasing the number, but at the same time I was just writing, which was really great fun. And I think, Lucy, you hit 300 and... Give me the exact number, Lucy.
I think it was 340.
340.
340.
Bill was on 380 something. Bill,
No,
is
I
that
think
right?
if my memory serves, I thought Lucy was 325. I was 344, and
I
Paul,
think
drum roll,
Yeah, so I hit
drum roll for
400.
Paul.
Yeah, I hit 405, which was
Wow.
Now,
crazy.
here's the
That
thing:
is
Paul has
crazy.
a full-time job. He has a relationship. He has children, and I think there must be two Paul DeMarcos. That's my only theory.
Yeah, because earlier he said he's on decaf.
Yes.
I'm not believing that now.
That's a lie.
He's
That's a
having
lie.
green tea. What? What?
Well, he's like,
That's
well,
not-
jet fuel doesn't have caffeine in it, does it? I'm on jet fuel.
But
and sorry again for everybody for blowing out that excuse. Oh damn, I
Right.
got kids, I got a life, I got a job. Sorry.
And
and
you know,
actually,
work here.
I have
we
to
had
give
a
you
lot of
guys.
fun doing it. We had a lot of fun doing it, and we gave ourselves team names. I was Team Tortoise. Bill was Team Hare. He beat me both years, and kudos bow down to Welsh Dragon.
Well,
Well, Dragon. He lives in Wales in the UK. Yeah.
It had to be something a little rock and roll. But I have to say, the route for me to these guys started with you, Brent and Johnny, and this isn't prepared beforehand. I'd been listening to the C.L.I.M.B and I joined Songwriting Pro, and so I started posting songs on Songwriting Pro feedback and on the C.L.I.M.B feedback. And I hooked up with a guy from Arizona called Dave Young, who had a band called Blackwater Lake, which we started writing for purely by hitting it off on that feedback post. Fast forward about a year or two later, and I joined Songtown as well. And I'd actually contacted Clay Mills about a contract that I'd been offered on a song that I'd written with Dave, and I was unsure about it. I wasn't sure it was on the level. And fair play, Clay, who he's a hit songwriter. He phoned me up. He rang me up from the States, and I live as far away from Nashville as possible. And he rang me up, and that's when he put me in touch with Lucy, and Lucy got in touch with Bill, and there it goes. So thanks to you guys as well, because that was a
Oh,
awesome.
I love it.
Love that.
We'll
So
take
I think,
responsibility for this.
yeah, sure, totally complete. So I think we need a new team name. It should be like, or the competition should be like Game of Songs, and the throne should have like a bunch of like guitars and pens and pencils sticking out of it instead of like swords.
Like it.
I'm not
So-
coming to your wedding. Don't
And
send me a wedding invitation from
Right.
friends.
The red wedding is rewrite day. You just get out the red pen and just start striking stuff. Which actually, a couple things. Well, one is about the red wedding, is about the rewriting, because I often think about that when I see that, like, hey, written this many songs for the year. I'm like, okay, what about rewrites? What about because a lot of people are like, okay, well, like Paul, that's over, for a couple of y'all, over a song a day. Do you go back and rewrite? What is your kind of your model and kind of what you're aiming for with the numbers? Because it's always, as it's not just about how many songs you write, because you don't walk into a publisher's office and say, I've written 400 songs this year, and they're gonna be like, where do we sign you? Right? Because it's not about that, but it does show a lot of work. It does show a lot of work and a lot of professional work ethic. But I'm curious about like your your rewriting process? Do you guys go back and rewrite, or when do you find time for that?
So every session that we do, and
Mhm.
we follow your ethos of thinking like, if you want to be a pro, you got to think like a pro, and that's exactly what we do.
Mhm.
So at the very beginning of a writing session, I may have one or two song ideas. Bill may have a song idea, but often we want to just go over something that we'd written before that I'd perhaps done a demo on, and something wasn't quite right, so we'll tweak it. But we kind of learn to work really quickly. It's very
Mhm.
easy to kind of derail a writing session by sitting there and thinking too much about it. But we
Yep.
found just keep it moving and keep it moving. And we managed to do that. But the whole session, we have a 2 hour session, sometimes three, but we treat it as if we just come into work and we start with any other business and then we get straight on to what we're writing today. And then at the end of the session, we have a little pitch chat as well about where the songs are going to go. So it is organized.
I love it. I love that. So, because it's one thing I've noticed too, can be it doesn't happen without being intentional about it, like going back and the rewriting. And sometimes, yeah, I've done that too. Like before co-write, I'll go and now I have a Trello list of songs that need to be finished or reworked or whatever, and then songs that are like finished, and going through and going, okay, I'm writing with so and so, tomorrow. Okay, is there anything that I need to bring up under the old business part of our agenda, right? Any old business? Well, before we get into that other one, let's button up this one, because that's being a finisher, I think, is really important, because having 1,000 half finished songs makes me $0, and it's 0% done to the rest of the world, right?
Yeah.
So, like, we got to get these across the finish line. It's always fun having that new energy, but if there's something that's worth, some things just aren't worth going back and another look, because you can only polish certain things so much. So, knowing the difference, but then I like that you start off with that, and I would think also that kind of gets you're starting, so it gives you a little bit of a running start. Like, oh, here's
Well,
one we're already familiar with,
that's
and
what I want to talk about. It's
yeah,
just it not only is the writing part of it intentional, and at the end there's a pitch part that's intentional. Okay, what are we going to do with it now?
yes,
But the momentum is intentional. You know, when we used to do that Tuesday night music club at Kelly's studio, where it was all about like coming up with a song, right? Just writing a song and then being able to just drop it right there with the live band and an artist and do something amazing. But we would always start with like a really killer cover just to get the ball going, just to get the train on the tracks. And then you know what? That momentum gets started when it's time to switch rails over to the creative part of the process. Everybody's fired up and ready to go. I think that's brilliant that you guys did that.
yeah,
Yeah, I
kudos.
think the challenge for writing that many songs is three things. One is just finishing, as you said, Brent. We just got to finish it and get that initial energy and capture that initial magic. And then the second thing is going back and making sure it's right. We tweak it and we demo it, or we do a master if we're going to do it for sync. And the third thing is just organization, keeping track of things. When you mentioned Trello, if you're writing that many songs, you got to have some sort of tool to track where the song is, what's happening with it, the follow up to it, and all that stuff. That's what became a challenge for me, because I'm not a naturally organized guy. So we use tools. We use, Google tools to write together, because we use Google Doc
Mhm.
to write together. But we also use Google spreadsheets to keep track of the status of the songs, where they're placed. Because we're in sync, some of them are exclusive and some of them are non-exclusive, and we have to make sure we don't mess up in that with having that many songs. And the other thing is just keeping track of the lyrics and the work tapes and things like that. So we just use all those tools. I use Dropbox for mine, a lot of my stuff, and then Disco and Song Space to pitch. And so you just got to have organizational tools and processes if you're going to do it. And like Paul said, and like again, I always hear you two talk about on the climb, you have to think like a pro even
Mhm.
before you're a pro, because when you get there, you're going to be swept up in it. And we've all have those processes in place writing this much.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so important, because publishing, because you are each your own publisher, right? So you're each your own publisher. But even if you have a publishing deal, it is still important to keep up with your songs, that sort of thing. And publishing, it sounds sexy, but it's a whole lot of spreadsheets. I used to work in publishing on the admin side, and there are some spreadsheets that I still have nightmares about. But it's keeping up with that stuff, because I've noticed too that I've had to up my game even more, going as the totality of the number of songs I've written goes only up, right? And going, oh, that song that fell through the cracks. What's up with that? But knowing your own catalog, I think it's super important. Bill, you were telling us something off air about how a sync brief came in. So a brief is basically, hey, we're looking for this type of song. Basically, you can explain it better than I can, because I don't work really in sync. But you're like, you know what? We got one that's almost there. And was that like an older song, or you tell us a little bit of that story?
Yeah,
I
it
think
was
the
an
power
older
of knowing
song.
your own catalog, keeping up with your
It
stuff.
was an older song, yeah. Knowing it again, we have a spreadsheet of everything we've done, and I have a Word file. I mean, it's not even a spreadsheet of every title I've written. Because one time Lucy and I went to write, and Lucy, when we go to write, I'll bring in a title, she'll bring in a title, or our other co-writer will bring in a title, and she goes on BMI or ASCAP to look up to see how unique that title is, because it may have been written 5,000 times, or it may have been written twice. And she always likes it lower numbers. So she tends to do that. And one day we were writing with someone, and I said, Lucy, I was kidding her because we'd already written a verse and a pre-chorus and a chorus. And I said, you didn't do your usual thing of looking up the title and see how unique it was. And it was a title that I brought. And she goes, oh, let me do that now. And she goes, here's the good news, Bill. There's only one other song with that title. The bad news is you and I wrote it 6 months ago with someone else. So you have to really, when you're writing that many songs, you have to pay attention. And I hadn't taken it out of my hook book. I just totally forgotten we'd written that song. So you have to stay organized. And we get briefs, and sometimes the brief will say, this particular one we had was, it needs to have the word smile in the hook. And I just went into my database and I looked for the word smile in it. A song that Paul and Lucy and I had written came up, and then it said it has to be an acoustic guitar or acoustic piano and a vocal, nothing else. And the song we'd written was a rock song, and it was not acoustic. And I wrote Paul and said, this song is perfect. You think you could do it? The deadline is in 4 hours. And, he's in the UK, so it's evening there. And
which, by the way, is
within
every
2 hours.
friggin' sync ever. The deadline is
that's it. The deadline is yesterday, always. The deadline is yesterday for every sync brief I've ever seen. But Paul knocked it out. He's a producer as well as a writer, and he knocked it out, and we submitted that song, and I think it got forwarded. I can't remember.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Is there somebody in the troika here? What I'm just curious about the room. Like, what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses of each? Somebody lyric strong? Is somebody particularly melody
almost
strong?
always. Paul almost always brings a whole song. That's when you said rewriting. That's what Lucy and I are doing when we first come in with Paul. He will get up in the morning and write 2 songs. And I'm like, Paul, what? And so then Lucy and I will hear them, and we'll look at each other and we'll say to Paul, that sounds great. That's a fantastic song, Paul. What is that song about exactly? And he'll tell us what it's about. And then we'll go, okay, now we know we can fix the lyrics. So Lucy and I often work on lyrics with him. I occasionally work on melody or instruments with Paul we write over Zoom. And so I think Lucy's almost exclusively titles and lyrics, and I do titles, lyrics, and some melody. I play a few instruments and I sing. So, but Paul is the bring in most of the music almost all the time. Occasionally, I'll write a chorus and send it to the 2 of them, and we'll finish it.
Cool.
Fascinating.
Lucy has another power as well, actually, because as you can see probably and hear on this podcast, Bill and I have so much energy between us that it's hard to sometimes put the lid on it. Whereas Lucy will sit back and she will go, hang on. that line we just wrote, something's not right about it. And me and Bill are like, no, it's fine. Come on, let's go. Next verse. And she's like, no, hang on.
She's the editor.
And
She's
she's
the
like,
editor and the
yeah.
taste. She makes sure nothing passes that isn't fantastic. So we're doing the rewriting in the room a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that's why we get through as much as we do. Plus, I'm writing in the studio, so when we get an idea down, if we get a new lyric, I can just bung that straight into the door, and I'll just do the vocal. It won't be the final vocal, but at least we'll have a reference, so you're not having to rely on your fading memory either.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's one of the fun things. Lucy, of course, as you know, I'm a lyricist. And so, melody people, especially if it's a three-way where they're banging away on guitars and they're figuring stuff out, I'm just like, sit back. And eventually they'll look at me and go, what do you think about that? I'm like, I don't know. I'm in lyric land. I will get to you momentarily. Because I'm sitting here either thinking ahead of like, where do we need to go in verse 2, or something about that first verse that's not quite right. And they're off, dancing in the field, having a party, and I'm like, somebody's got to make the trains run on time. What's going on here? So it sounds like that's kind of your vibe, Lucy. Somebody's got to be the parent. Somebody's got to be the grown up, Lucy.
Well, she's also great at bringing rooms together, as she told. She brought the three of us together. I think that's, I don't know if that's often talked about as a co-writing skill, but it is a great co-writing skill. Knowing what personalities might fit together and what different strengths fit together. Like you said, Johnny, what are your strengths? Lucy knew to bring another person in who had a slightly different strength than she did, and put us together. And I think that's one of Lucy's geniuses. It's one of her superpowers.
Yeah, it's so important. Not every superpower shows up directly on the page. Of course, she's good with lyrics. I've heard enough of her stuff to know she's a quality writer. But yeah, it's those soft skills of knowing who's going to fit in the room. What is my role today? Being the editor, I've heard several people talk about that. Just depending on the day. Hey, maybe one day I'll be the editor. The other person is just driving like a mad person, and just with all this creativity. And it's my job to kind of go, okay, why don't we aim it over here? And here's a guardrail here. And other days it may swap. So I think knowing your roles helps. And of course, those roles may change on different days.
They do.
Yeah.
For me, they change a little with the three of us, but they change from right to right. And I bring the irreverent humor to every right. And so I think, I know you two have a lot of fun on the podcast, but there's something about humor that opens you up to creativity because you're not so rigid and not so stuck. All of a sudden somebody laughs, and the next thing, it's like, sometimes, I know you know this, Brent, you go to the bathroom and you get a epiphany because it's a break from struggling to make something happen. And it's the same thing with humor. If you just spend the whole time falling about laughing, that's not great. But if you lighten up the mood every once in a while, it helps that creativity come through when you might have been a little constipated with it.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. If you're laughing, if you're having a good time, better chance you're gonna have a good song.
Yeah.
So okay, so let's.
Sorry, there's a certain energy between people, and you become very comfortable too with that energy and know how far you can push, and you can push. And you can push in different ways. You don't have to be loud.
Right.
There are subtle ways of pushing. But the three of us work well together. I mean, Bill is such a fountain of ideas, and his lyric lines that come out, and his melody sense. And Paul, well, they don't call him the Welsh Dragon for nothing, I mean, he's got it all happening, and he's got the power. So, and then somehow the three of us kind of, I don't know, that energy sparks, and it just runs rampant when we're going. And how Paul is able to bring in so many different ideas that are just right on point for sync. And we've got the places to pitch them, and we've got the briefs that we can write to. And Paul has the expertise to do up the track and just drive that train home. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the results that you got last year, because I want you guys to share that. And then also, who brought those relationships? Like, where did those sync relationships come from?
Well, I think we all have our own different sources. I was going down to Nashville a lot, and I met some publishers down there and started getting some single song contracts. This was before I met Bill and Paul. And there are different avenues. I don't know if you want us to bring those avenues out right now. We can.
Well, I
Well,
think
I
again,
just
Whatever you're
we
comfortable
meet
with. I mean,
people. Well, yeah, we meet people at conferences. Lucy and I met physically at the Durango Songwriters Expo, and there are a bunch of sync agents as well as country publishers at that one. And Lucy and I would pitch to those people, and then we'd hear each other's songs. And again, like you said, Brent, when you hear somebody's song, you're sitting in a room and there's 20 songs played, and 18 of them aren't up to the level you need to be for commercial success. And you hear one or two are like, wow, I want to write with that person. And
mm,
then we sometimes swap resources. I'll tell Lucy, hey, I'm pitching for sync through this, or there's a pitch to publisher, Brent Baxter has this, or you should listen to the Climb, you should join Songwriting Pro. We just exchange resources. I'm probably the most, because I'm a little hyperactive, the most pitch oriented. And because I have a business, but I don't have to work in that business so much, every morning I get up and pitch 5 to 10 songs, some to country, some to sync. And so I'm a big pitcher. And again, that's something to think about when you co-write. To me, not only do they bring the song ideas and are they good in the room with you, but what do they do afterwards? Do they deliver the work tape? Do they deliver the demo? Can they produce it? If they can produce it, especially if you're working in sync, and you call on the master, they're worth their weight in gold to me. And then who pitches? Who follows up? Who makes sure the songs get out there in the world? Because as you say, otherwise they're sitting in your hard drive and they're not making anybody any money or being heard by anybody. So I love that kind of resource sharing. And that's another point. Some people don't co-write, and I think, well, okay, great. But you've got three people. If you have three co-writers, three people potentially getting your song out there, pitching that song, making connections with publishers or sync agents or wherever to get that song heard and placed somewhere. So that's another argument for co-writing. For those of you out there listening who aren't co-writing, I didn't co-write for the first 4 years of my career as a songwriter. And then I started co-writing, and it was challenging at first because I wasn't used to it. And now I'm addicted to it for all those reasons we just talked about.
And let's get rid of another excuse. I've never even been to Nashville. I've been to America once. I went to New York just before the pandemic started. It's the only time I've ever been to America. And I always ask the question, how am I ever going to how am I going to get my songs heard on Music Row? But people have to take opportunities like Brent's Play for Publisher events. We're all members of Songtown, and they have groups that you can join which have genuine publishers in that will listen to your song and will take them. And we've had songs taken. I think too many people think, right, I've written a song, and that's great. But like you say, if it lives on your hard drive, then that's no good. One song that we had taken as well is a song that I'd released. I'd made a YouTube video, just a lyric video of it, and Bill shared the link when I released the song, and Nashville publishers saw the song, heard the song, and went, Bill, who's this? This is great. Where can I get hold of this song? And they signed it there and then. But if we hadn't have taken the time
Awesome.
to make it discoverable, then that would never have happened. So those who think that you have to be in Nashville or you have to be knocking on publishers' doors, literally, that's not necessarily the case. You've got to get your songs out there. You've got to build a team, and co-writing is a great way of doing that.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. So, Bill, just out of curiosity, because we talked about this a couple times in the podcast, where I've had a couple artists that I've dealt with who just sort of had like the golden voice, and this is a generalization. It's not always the truth, but sometimes, I mean, I think there's a reason why Bob Dylan's lyrics are so good, because Bob Dylan can't sing. You know what I mean? So he's got to blow you away with the lyrics, right? And then when you got the singer that's just got the golden voice, a lot of times if they're a self-contained artist, then because they can sing the phone book and make you cry, the lyrics sort of are like, they don't need to work that hard on them because they're blowing you away with the voice. And every time that I've sort of I've got a term I want to use, but it's inappropriate. But every time every time I put them
What's
in
the
their
clean
first,
translation for that? Yeah.
Yeah.
every time I put them in a writing room for the first time, I mean, it is, yeah. It's how did you feel after the first co-write? I'm curious.
Actually, the first co-write I ever did went really, really well. I was thrown in the deep end because, you know, again, if you're used to being a solo writer, it's such a personal and private thing, and you don't want to look stupid in front of somebody and all that stuff. And I actually got together with two other people, and I'm like, wow, that went way better than I thought. I still like the song that we wrote, and but you're right. I think I go out and I hear people in Nashville. I live part time in Nashville, and I hear people in Nashville. I think that person is fantastic. Their songs aren't that good. They need our songs. You know, they have that golden voice, and they can make, as you say, they can sing the phone book and sound great. They need our songs, and that gives me a great deal of hope because I think with the right it's like the perfect wave, right? The perfect storm. If they have that great voice, a great band, great management, all the stuff that you talk about, that getting themselves out there, and then they have the right song at the right time, that's where it gives me hope as a songwriter. All they need is us.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, like I'm just thinking about Malk. Like the first time I put him, he just was like so. He didn't know what to think. It was like he was like it went really well. You know what I mean? But he's just like he felt violated, and at the same time, it kind of felt good. And I mean, he's all conflicted about it. You know what I mean?
I always ask people after the first write, will you still respect me in the morning? Yeah, that's it.
Right.
Right. It was so hard for him to do that. And then I remember because at the time he was still living in LA and he had come out just to mix a project, and I had worked with him when I lived in LA. And then we lived together for like the second year I was back, and the third year I was back. But he would then come skipping home from a co-write, like, look at what we got, and I was like, oh, this turned around, didn't it? Like,
yeah, it's like anything. The more you do it and you get used to it, and also you find the right people for it. I mean, that for me, I've had to, I was never the popular guy in high school. I went out on, I think, one date, and now I understand what those pretty girls felt like and how they have to say, I'm washing my hair on Friday night, I'm washing my hair on Saturday night. I've had to break up with songwriters that it wasn't working with. They were great. They were fine songwriters. It just didn't work with me. And I think you have to be a little ruthless if you're really serious about becoming a commercial songwriter and say, you're a nice person. It's just not working, and I'm washing my hair. I'm washing my hair for the next 3 months, so I can't go right with you.
Yeah. It's like Tom. It's like Aaron Rodgers doesn't still play ball with his high school buddies.
Right.
It's just like, I'm sorry, I had to go to college, and it's a new crew, and then after college, I'm sorry.
Aaron Rodgers. Jesus. Like,
did something just happen?
No, I'm ready to choke him out.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to do it because I know you're a Packers fan. I didn't realize the other stuff going on.
This year, I'm against it. Like, I can't believe it.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. So,
but the analogy holds. The analogy holds.
Right? Patrick Mahomes isn't still playing with the guys he went to Texas Tech with. Whatever.
Thank you.
Unless they made it to the pros too. All right. One thing that I want to point out is culture. That what is the norm for your group? For your group, the norm is I wrote a song today, or I'm pitching, or I'm rewriting. That's the culture that the three of you, to a certain extent or another, already had and brought into this group. And now that's the group culture. It's going to be weird if Paul goes, I didn't write anything last week. What? Bill's hat's going to blow off, right? So, and nobody wants that, right? So that's the culture. And I've noticed with some of my friends that are like more successful. I have a friend in particular in like Southern Gospel who's had tons of number ones. We would get together to write, be here, and this other person. And it's just a normal part of conversation about oh, I could pitch this to so and so, or oh, hey, by the way, I sent our song to this person, this person, this person. Like the plugging and the pitching was just a part of the conversation. It was the culture that she brought into that room. A lot of rooms I've been in, it's not really talked about very much. Like you go write the thing, and it's not like, okay, where do we go with this? Or oh, the last couple of things, hey, let's do that. It wasn't part of the culture. I'm like, okay, let's see here. The person that I write with has had the most number ones. That is a part of her culture. That's a normal part, is an integrated part of her doing business. And she has a bunch of number ones. Let's see here. What can I learn from this? And so that's one thing I admire about what y'all are doing is building this culture and say, what do we want our culture to be? We want to write, we want to rewrite, we want to act, it's write, record, access, and pitch, right? It's the RAP acronym that, like, you're definitely all about writing. You got the recording, you're working on accessing because you've talked about going to conferences and meeting people, being part of different groups and doing workshops and different things, and then actually pitching every day. And those are the four legs that, a successful songwriter, the bar stool sits on. And that's part of it. You putting all four in your culture. And I think that's something to point out to people, is going, hey, as you're building your team, what is a team culture? Is it normal to say, oh, I haven't written in a week or two, or yeah, it's been busy with stuff? Or is the culture, yeah, I write and I pitch and I record, and that's what I do. And that's what's normal for this crew is, so find your crew that's at least aspiring to that. They can hold each other accountable. I'm trying to build that more with like the people I write with. Whenever I pitch a song, I'll text my co-writers, hey, pitch this song to so-and-so today, fingers crossed, or whatever, just to inject that. Like, oh yeah, that's a thing we can do too. It's amazing. Some songwriters don't think about that. Like, oh yeah, there's that part of it. I mean, yeah, that's a part that kind of makes money. Like that's
well, and
the part where you walk to the bank,
yeah. I think to your point too, it takes a village to get a hit. It takes a village to get a placement. That is, that's what you and Johnny always talk about. Johnny talks about the business side and the marketing side, is that those aren't separate things from me. If I want to be a commercial songwriter, if I want to be a successful songwriter, I need a team that really works on the business side and the legal side and the creative side and all that stuff. I hired one of my roommates in Nashville who was out of work during the pandemic for a little while to register my songs, because at that point, writing 344 songs a year, I wasn't keeping my PRO registrations up, and I had a little more money than she did, and I wanted to help a fellow songwriter. So you have to find your team to get the business parts, the organizational parts, the marketing parts, the pitching parts, as well as the creative parts. And it's all a team sport to me.
I have a question, DeMarco. Like, I know I've seen you on Facebook, and I mean, one of the reasons that we connect the way that we do with our spirits is just because you'll bust out a freaking Iron Maiden song, and do a video of it. I'm like, yes, like I love that. So, of all the songs y'all wrote like last year, and you still haven't said, like, first of all, how many placements did you get? Like just give the results. Like, let's give the report card on that, because I want people to hear about how much y'all did. And then secondly, how many of those songs, what genre were those songs? Like, because you can go back and forth, Paul. I know that about you. So how does that work for you guys? Does the song sort of come out and then lend itself to, oh, that's going to be a rock song, or were they all country? How did it work?
So the cool thing is, because we are so diverse with our styles, and there's virtually no music I don't like. I'll find something of value in anything, which is great, because then no doors are closed. The very first session we wrote a song called Designs on You, which Bill had been to the optician or dentist. Optician, I believe, Bill, right?
Yeah, optician, yeah.
Been to the optician, and when the optician sort of leant over to do a thing, he noticed she was covered in tattoos, and we were like, and Bill was like, wow, I want to know. He was just taken aback by it. He didn't expect that. And so we wrote a song from that story. That was actually the first song that we got taken but it took maybe about a year and a half before that song was then taken by a sync publisher, which was
And
really
it
good.
won an award. It won an award at
Yeah,
the Texas, what was that, Lucy? Austin or Texas Songwriters Association?
Yeah, the Austin one. Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
yeah,
I remember that
Austin
song because that
Songwriters.
came
Yeah.
through one of the Play for Publisher events that we do at
Yeah, yeah,
Songwriting
yeah.
Pro. And either made the top 10 or the on hold or something, but I remember that one coming through.
yeah. And we did 4 versions of that song. We did 4
Yeah.
different versions. We did a rock version, we had an Americana version, we had a country pop version, then we had an acoustic songwriter version. It was the rock one that was actually taken, Johnny. So yes, but then the next song that we got taken, for some reason, I'd been listening to a band called the Teskey Brothers from Australia. They were a soul band, Motown sounding band, brilliant band. Anyway, I just got really inspired to check out that Motown. So we wrote this Motown song. Totally out of left field. We weren't expecting it. And we wrote this song called Best Damn Day of My Life, which was a straight up Motown tune that got taken. And then we have another song, which is completely Americana acoustic, and that's got taken and also being played to Justin Benoit, a Canadian artist, for him potentially cutting it as well. So
Nice.
we're not tunnel visioned at all. We're not going to go, oh, I'm not going to write that because it's country. I don't do country. I'm not going to write that because it's metal and I don't do metal. We're just like, what's the pitch want? Let's do it. And if it doesn't work out and it's not the greatest sounding song in the world, then fair enough. But you just
So you're writing for the pitch, is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, no, the first
you
one.
guys have a blueprint or a target to hit.
Yes. Yeah. So,
Okay.
So and
Well,
and
again,
that
it's
makes a
like
difference.
it's like I hear Brent say, about the songwriting stuff. Study one country artist and get to know their style. When they're got another thing, start writing for them. Really get into their style in their head. It's the same thing with sync. That's like a brief for country. You go, okay, write a Kenny Chesney song that's not like the old ones. It's what he's going to do next. But you got to know Kenny Chesney inside out before you do that. And you got to know country inside out before you do that. So it's the same thing with briefs for sync. We get a brief that says write a Motown song, and we'll write a Motown song, write a rock song that's that's in this style, and so that inspires us a lot. Lucy's got over 100 indie cuts. I've got I'm heading towards 40 this year. I started a little later than Lucy. Paul puts out his own stuff, and we've gotten a bunch signed to sync. And nothing placed, no big placements yet, but we're on our way.
How many to sync?
How many are signed? I think we have 10 or 12 signed in sync at this point, maybe more.
Love it.
We'd have to look in the
Love it.
spreadsheet. And, we also write with other people. So in addition to that, I probably got 60 or 70 songs signed in sync. I've got my first placements. I got a placement on an MTV show. I got a placement just the other day for a promo. So we're getting placements at this point. It's a long game, just like a lot easier than getting country cuts, though. Getting major country cuts is sync is like winning this $100 scratch off ticket, and country is like winning the Mega Millions lottery. It's less likely, but always possible. Somebody's got to win that Mega Millions, and somebody's got to win the scratch off. So
That's right. So Lucy, let me ask you this question. When you guys are vacillating between, it is difficult, I think, to vacillate between genres. And I know this because I think everybody believes they can be a country writer because they wrote songs somewhere else, and then it's like, no, I never aspired to be a country writer, but when I came to town, I tried, I was getting into writing some songs and stuff, and it just all just sounded like rock and roll, man. Like, like I couldn't get it. That's just who I was, And so what's the mindset, or what's the sort of process that you use to make sure that you're being native, right? I mean, so if you guys get the pitch and you're like, okay, they want a country song, so you're going to choose a certain chord structure, and then who's the lyric police to make sure that the lyrics are going to be, for lack of a better word, native to the platform?
That the lyrics will be which? I didn't catch the end of that.
native to the platform, like
Another
you know.
appropriate for
Yeah.
the
If it's
genre you're
country,
writing.
it'll be right for
Right.
country. If it's rock, it'll be right for rock or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
like it'll make sense. I think you know a lot of people just think, well, I'm going to take this song here, throw a banjo on it. Now it's country,
Yeah.
and then it's confusing because sometimes that has happened, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so it gets a
Always an
little weird,
exception
but
to the rule, though.
Mhm.
so just
Yeah.
curious, like you know, when you're because since you're the you know sort of keeping these two tied down and on track here, like when what goes through your head? Like how do you keep that puck in play?
Well, you know, first of all, in sync, they don't often ask for a lot of country songs.
Mhm.
It isn't there, but there are opportunities for it. And I'm not a native country writer, so to get into the nuances of what you want to say in there, you have to dig a little harder, and it's easier if you're writing with someone who is a native country writer, and you can dig into what's going through their head. But what I try to do in any write is uh, to try and get into the head of my co-writer of what they're wanting to say, and hoping to bring it out of them and say it in the way they would say it, especially if that is their native land, if that's what they gravitate to the most, and try to bring that out of it. And then I try to bring it out of myself too. And
Mhm.
I can't answer how that's done. I
Well,
can't.
again, I've heard Brent say this, but it's would someone sing this? You know, could you
Mhm.
hear this country person sing this? And also, if you ever went to their show, how would the audience react? Are they going to get up and go to the bathroom or get a beer during that song? Or are they going to stay and go, I got to listen to this? And, you know, I think, again, you got to listen to the genre. I've written with people who want to write country and don't listen to country and think modern country sucks. And I'm like, sorry, you're not going to do well if you disrespect that thing. I've started writing hip hop. That's, you know, I am not a hip hop guy, but I've been listening to hip hop because a friend of mine wants to write hip hop, clean hip hop for advertisements and for sports placements. And I'm like, I don't listen to that much. Let me get into it. And I found stuff I like. Some I don't like, and some I like. You got to find something you like and then immerse yourself in it and respect that genre and learn what the vocabulary is. There's certain things that I never say in country, and there's certain things that I would always say in country. And yeah, there's a certain structure. And if you don't know that, you probably shouldn't write in that. And if you don't respect it, you shouldn't write it.
Got to be
Yeah,
a
respect.
student of the game.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I guess that's what I was kind of thinking because even the structure, the chord structures matter, right?
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
what the chord progressions are going to be, the
I
changes.
wrote with a pro writer, and I had a really cool riff, and he said, "No, Bill, that's not country." He said, "My guitar doesn't go into A," and I thought he was joking. And he was like, "It's G, C, D, E minor. That's it. That's all I write with country." And I'm like, "Really? I've heard country songs without A in it, but whatever." But I got his point. Don't make it too fancy. You know,
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
make it
Yeah.
too fancy like in the chord structure for country. And I get it. You can make it cool with simple chords with country.
But
what
Johnny,
has
you,
been
yeah, go on.
drawn into me is conversational. It's been drummed into
And
me through the years.
conversational,
It's
definitely, yes.
conversational lyrics for country. Yes.
Yeah.
I also think it takes a little bit of a personality check as well, because there are no egos in the room when we write. And Johnny, when I first started writing with these guys, we were doing country because they'd been writing country, and I was unaware how much country had an influence on me. But the thing is, every time we'd write a song and I'd do the demo, I'd have my Les Paul cranked, and and it'd go to them, and they're like, "Yeah, I like it. It's a bit rocky," and I'd be like, "What do you mean? What do you mean it's a
You
bit
think?
rocky? There's an
Yeah.
acoustic in there on the left-hand side."
He thought it was pure country, and I was like, no, that's rock, Paul. Thanks.
But the thing is,
Yeah.
I could have turned around and said, "What are you talking about? That's the way I hear it in my head, so you're wrong." But I didn't. You have to go,
Yeah.
okay, fair enough. And if you got to be thick-skinned in that way, but you've also got to be prepared to be told that you're wrong, and then just
Yeah.
do something about it. Yeah.
And no, yeah, I know what it and certainly, I mean, with country, that was the epiphany for me. I mean, a bunch of people that used to be on my crew when I was an artist are on like Tim McGraw's crew now, and they've been on that crew for like years, for over a decade. And so I remember when I still lived in LA, and they would, every time they come through town, it's like, I'm going to get a call or a text. Hey man, come on. You want to come out? We're coming through, yeah, come on, say hi and hug on your neck. And I just remember the first time I walked out there, it was Luke Bryan's first tour. And I just had this like Alzheimer's moment. You know what I mean? 'Cause I'm looking up on stage, and there's a Les Paul up there. There's a Marshall stack. And I'm looking at my ticket, like I'm pretty damn sure we just got through the gate. We're supposed to be, like, what the hell is that? You know what I mean? Like, what's going on here? What's happening here? You know what I mean? Yeah. And then that dude came out, and they were doing rock stuff, and I'm like, we can do that now, And I texted Kelly, I'm like, look at this guy. There's a Marshall stack at a country show. Holy crap! Who knew?
yeah, completely. There's no solos in country music anymore. You want them back?
They need to come back. We need to bring back the 12-bar guitar solo. Yeah, why not? Gibson would like that, wouldn't they? They'll sell more damn guitars.
Yeah, right. Completely. But Eric Church,
there's no guitar heroes in country either, which is a problem. I mean, like I always said this just from strictly a marketing perspective. If you go to a Keith Urban show, or if you go to a Brad Paisley show, you're like, holy crap, it's a vulgar display of prowess. Yeah. But why aren't they being marketed like Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton and George Lynch? Mm-hmm. I mean, and Eddie Van Halen. Why aren't they? Why wouldn't you what, think about Chet Atkins, right? Yeah. I just think like these were like if you were Joe Schmo from Kokomo, you knew Chet Atkins was a vulgar display of prowess on the guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a mistake. I think that's it. And also, by the way, an open lane now, no traffic.
Yeah.
That's all right. I'm eyeing that up. I am eyeing that up. I'll preach at that church. I'll preach at that church.
Paul could do that.
My God, I'm so glad you guys came on and did this. I think what you did was amazing.
Yep.
Thank you.
What you're doing is amazing.
So, what you're doing is amazing, and what you continue to do. And you know what? I love how you're like, that Sing Sir, that came a year and a half later or whatever. Mm-hmm. Guess what? Yeah. You don't get that unless you have that stockpile up, for this. So the songwriters out there, and I've heard so many, I'm just going to see how these 3 songs do before I decide if I'm going to be a songwriter. And maybe if they don't get the validation that I need, I'll be an astronaut or a fireman. I'm not sure. It's like you just got to go in and do it, man. Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think that these 3 writers here, Brent, if they weren't writing, I think they'd be on the news. I think they'd be climbing a tower with a gun. You know what I mean? It's like they didn't choose music. Music chose them. Right.
Well, keep picking up the guitars and the pens.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming on. That brings us to the end of another Killer Climb episode. Bill O'Hanlon, Lucy LeBlanc, Paul DeMarco. Vulgar display of prowess. Slow clap to you guys. Everybody needs to focus on this model here, and go and start, making some stuff happen here, man. That's the deal. That's right. That's why we had him on here. This podcast exists because we want you to win. So keep on climbing,
and we'll see you at the top.